The rusted swing creaked in the autumn wind, a lonely sound that echoed through the abandoned playground like a ghost's lament. Kira pressed herself deeper into the shadows of the broken gazebo, her skeletal frame barely visible against the rotting wood. Her silver-blue eyes tracked every movement, every shadow, every scent carried on the breeze. She'd been watching this place for 3 weeks now, and she knew the pattern as intimately as her own heartbeat. At precisely 3:15, the little girl would slip through the gap in the chain-link fence. Kira's stomach cramped with familiar hunger, a pain so constant she'd learned to breathe around it. The last time she'd eaten a full meal seemed like a lifetime ago, back when she had a pack, a home, a future that stretched beyond the next sunrise. Now her ribs showed through the threadbare fabric of her stolen jacket, and her cheekbones cut sharp angles in her hollow face. But none of that mattered when the child was near. The fence rattled, and Kira's pulse quickened. Lily Blackthorne emerged like a small miracle, her dark curls bouncing as she squeezed through the gap with practiced ease. At 7 years old, she should have been in school, surrounded by friends and laughter. Instead, she came here, to this forgotten place where broken playground equipment stood like sentinels over cracked concrete and weeds. Why does she come here alone? Kira wondered, not for the first time. The supernatural district had its dangers, even for the daughter of an alpha. Especially for the daughter of that alpha. Lily skipped toward the swings, humming a tune that made Kira's chest ache with memories of her own childhood. Before the blood. Before the screaming. Before everything turned to ash and shadow. "Hello, Angel," Lily called softly, not looking in Kira's direction but somehow knowing she was there. The child had done this every day for weeks, greeting the darkness where Kira hid as if they were old friends. Kira's throat worked, but no sound came. She'd forgotten how to be human, how to exist in the light instead of skulking in shadows like the rogue she'd become. So she remained silent, a broken guardian watching over innocence she could never reclaim. Lily settled onto the swing, her small hands gripping the chains. Daddy had another one of his meetings today. The scary men with the red eyes came again. She kicked her legs, not quite tall enough to make the swing move properly. "I drew them in my coloring book. They looked like monsters, but Daddy says I have too much imagination." Red eyes. Kira's blood chilled. Council members. She'd heard whispers in the supernatural underground, ancient beings who pulled strings from the shadows, who made even alpha kings dance to their tune. If they were meeting with Lily's father. A twig snapped somewhere beyond the playground's boundaries. Kira tensed, every predatory instinct screaming danger, but the scent was wrong. Too wild, too desperate. Rogue wolves, probably a mated pair by the overlapping territorial markers. They were heading straight for Lily. Kira moved before conscious thought could stop her, flowing from shadow to shadow until she positioned herself between the fence and the swings. Her body protested every step, muscles weakened by starvation, bones that felt brittle as old paper. But her wolf stirred beneath her skin, silver power humming despite her physical frailty. The rogues burst through the tree line, their partially shifted forms grotesque in the failing daylight. Yellow fangs gleamed as they caught sight of Lily, and their laughter sent ice through Kira's veins. Well, the male snarled, his voice distorted by his elongated jaw. "What have we here?" "Fresh meat, and she smells like power." Lily had stopped swinging, but she didn't run. Didn't even seem afraid. Instead, she turned to look directly at Kira's hiding spot and smiled. "It's okay, Angel. I know you'll protect me." The faith in that small voice broke something inside Kira's chest. She stepped from the shadows, letting her wolf rise to the surface. Her form rippled, bones stretching and reshaping even as malnutrition made the shift agony. Where a broken girl had stood moments before, now crouched a silver wolf with eyes like winter storms. The rogues faltered. Silver wolves were legend, myth, stories told to pups about the moon goddesses chosen. They weren't supposed to exist. But here she was, and despite her weakened state, power radiated from her in waves that made the rogues whimper and back away. "Impossible," the female whispered. Kira bared her fangs and let out a low growl that vibrated through the ground itself. The rogues broke and ran, disappearing into the woods as quickly as they'd come. The shift back to human form nearly killed her. Kira collapsed behind the gazebo, her body convulsing as her wolf retreated deep inside where hunger couldn't touch it. She lay gasping on the cold concrete, tasting blood. Small feet appeared in her line of vision, followed by a worried face framed by dark curls. Angel? Are you hurt? Lily knelt beside her, those impossibly blue eyes filled with concern that no 7-year-old should have to feel. Kira tried to speak, managed only a harsh whisper. You should go home. Not without you. Lily reached into her small backpack and pulled out a paper bag. I brought you something. The scent hit Kira like a physical blow, fresh bread, still warm from the oven. Her stomach twisted so violently she nearly sobbed. Mrs. Chen at the bakery always gives me extra, Lily said, carefully tearing the roll in half. She says I'm too skinny, but I think she just likes me. She held out the larger piece to Kira. Here. You need it more than I do. Kira stared at the offering, at this child who should fear her, who instead wanted to feed her. I can't, take your food. You already protect me, Lily said simply. This is how I protect you. The bread was soft and warm, tasting like heaven and childhood memories. Kira ate slowly, trying to make it last, while Lily chattered about her day. Miss Sarah teaches us about different supernatural creatures, Lily said, swinging her legs as she sat cross-legged beside Kira. Today we learned about silver wolves. She said they were special, that they could heal people but it made them sick. Kira nearly choked on her bread. What else did she say? That they were all gone now. Something bad happened to them. Lily's voice grew quiet. But you're not gone, are you? You're right here. Before Kira could respond, Lily skinned her knee on the concrete as she shifted position. Blood welled bright red against pale skin, and the child hissed in pain. Instinct overrode self-preservation. Kira reached out, pressing her palm over the scrape. Silver light pulsed beneath her skin, flowing into the wound. The bleeding stopped, the torn flesh knitting itself closed until only smooth skin remained. The cost was immediate and devastating. Kira's vision grayed, her body convulsing as the healing drained what little strength she had left. She collapsed sideways, her breathing shallow and erratic. Angel. Lily's voice seemed to come from very far away. Small hands touched her face, warm and worried. Angel, please don't leave me. I'm dying, Kira realized with detached clarity. Her body had finally reached its limit. All those weeks of starvation, of pushing beyond endurance, of burning her own life force to stay functional, it had all led to this moment. She tried to speak, to tell Lily to run, to find her father and never come back to this place. But darkness was creeping in from the edges of her vision, and her voice was gone. It's okay, Lily whispered, and there was something different in her tone. Something older, sadder. Daddy will come today, and everything changes. The words should have been nonsensical, the rambling of a frightened child. But they fell on Kira's ears with the weight of prophecy, as if the universe itself had spoken through Lily's lips. How could she know? The thought drifted through Kira's fading consciousness. But then she remembered the stories, whispers about the old bloodlines, about children born with sight beyond sight. Prophet child. The recognition hit her just as her body began to shut down. She's not just any alpha's daughter. Lily continued stroking her hair, humming that same haunting tune. Don't worry, Angel. I drew it in my coloring book this morning. 3 black cars, and Daddy with his angry face. But he's not really angry at you. He's angry at himself. Kira wanted to ask what she meant, but her body was shutting down, pulling her into darkness that felt suspiciously like peace. For the first time in 2 years, she wasn't afraid. If she died here, at least it would be protecting something pure, something worth the sacrifice. The sound of engines cut through her dying thoughts. Heavy. Powerful. Multiple vehicles moving in formation. Lily's humming stopped. "Oh," she said, and there was surprise in her voice. "They're early." Kira forced her eyes open, though it cost her nearly everything she had left. Through the chain-link fence, she could see them, 3 black SUVs with tinted windows, moving with military precision as they surrounded the playground. The engines cut off in perfect synchronization, and for a moment, the world held its breath. "Run," Kira tried to tell Lily. "Hide." But her voice was gone, her body beyond response. The doors opened simultaneously, disgorging men in dark suits who moved with predatory grace. But Kira's attention was caught by the figure emerging from the center vehicle. He was massive, easily 6.5 feet of solid muscle wrapped in expensive clothes that couldn't hide the dangerous power radiating from him like heat from a forge. His black hair was perfectly styled despite the late hour, and when he turned toward the playground, Kira caught sight of eyes so dark they seemed to absorb light. Alpha King Darius Blackthorne. She'd never seen him in person, but his reputation preceded him like a storm front. The man who'd united the werewolf packs through conquest and fear. The ruler who'd brought order to chaos through methods that made other alphas wake screaming. The man whose daughter Kira had been protecting without even realizing who she was. He moved toward the fence with fluid grace, each step measured and predatory. His nostrils flared, and Kira knew he was reading the scene through scent, the rogues, her wolf, the lingering trace of silver power. "Lily." His voice carried easily across the playground, rich and deep with an undertone that made every supernatural instinct in Kira's body scream danger. "Come here. Now." But instead of obeying, Lily moved to position herself between her father and Kira's collapsed form. "She protected me, Daddy. The bad wolves came, and she saved me." Darius's dark eyes found Kira through the fence, and the impact of his gaze nearly stopped her failing heart. This close, she could feel his power like a weight on her chest, could sense the carefully leashed violence that made him the most feared alpha in North America. He was death in an expensive suit, and she was too weak to run. "Step away from her, Lily." His tone never changed, but somehow it became more terrifying. "That's not a request." Kira tried to push herself up, to crawl away, to do anything that might draw his attention from his daughter. Her body responded with agonizing slowness, muscles spasming as she managed to lift her head. The movement caught Darius's attention like a gunshot. His eyes locked with hers through the fence, and for a moment, time seemed suspended. Something flickered across his features, recognition? Impossible. They'd never met. But then his expression hardened into something glacial, and Kira knew her time was up. "Lily," he said again, and this time his voice carried the force of an alpha command that would compel obedience from any wolf. "Come here immediately." To Kira's amazement, Lily didn't move. She remained crouched protectively over Kira's fallen form, her small chin set in stubborn lines that reminded Kira painfully of her own brother at that age. "She's dying, Daddy," Lily said, and tears were running down her cheeks. "She's been hungry for so long, and she used her light to heal me, and now she's dying." Her light. Even through her pain, Kira marveled at the child's perception. How could Lily understand what she'd done when most adult wolves couldn't recognize silver healing? Darius climbed the fence in one fluid movement that spoke of inhuman strength and grace. His men followed, spreading out in a formation that spoke of military training and absolute loyalty. They were preparing for a threat assessment, Kira realized. She was the threat. Good luck with that, she thought with grim humor. She could barely keep her eyes open, let alone pose a danger to the most powerful alpha on the continent. Darius approached with predatory caution, and Kira caught his scent, pine and leather, power and darkness, with an underlying note of something that made her wolf whine with confused longing. Her dying body's reaction made no sense, but then nothing had made sense since she'd started watching over his daughter. He stopped just outside of arm's reach, studying her with those impossibly dark eyes. "You're the wolf that's been stalking my daughter." It wasn't a question, so Kira didn't try to answer. She was using all her remaining energy just to keep breathing. "She wasn't stalking," Lily protested, moving to stroke Kira's hair with gentle fingers. "She was protecting." Every day, she watches over me. She saved me from the scary wolves just now. Darius's gaze flicked to his daughter, and for a moment, his expression softened almost imperceptibly. But when he looked back at Kira, his face was stone again. "What's your name?" he demanded. Kira's lips moved, but no sound emerged. Her throat was raw from the shift, her body shutting down system by system. "She can't talk, Daddy. She's too weak." Lily's voice was plaintive, desperate. "Please don't hurt her. She's good. I know she's good." Something in his daughter's tone must have reached him, because Darius knelt down, bringing his face level with Kira's. Up close, she could see flecks of gold in his dark eyes, could feel the heat radiating from his skin. "You're dying," he observed with clinical detachment. Kira managed the barest nod. "Good," he said softly, and the word hit her like a physical blow. One less rogue to worry about. But even as he spoke, his nostrils flared again, and confusion flickered across his features. His hand moved toward her face, stopping just short of contact. "Your scent," he murmured, and there was something almost vulnerable in his voice. "Why do you smell like?" He didn't finish the sentence, but his expression shifted from cold assessment to something that might have been pain. His hand finally made contact, fingers brushing her forehead with surprising gentleness. The moment his skin touched hers, Kira's world exploded into sensation. Images flooded her mind, fragments of memory, emotion, connection. She saw herself through his eyes, saw recognition that couldn't possibly exist, felt a bond that made no sense. Mate. The word echoed through her consciousness like a death knell. But that was impossible. Her mate had died with the rest of her pack. She'd felt the bond sever, had lived with that emptiness for 2 years. Unless. 2 mates. The legend whispered through her fading mind. Silver wolves could bond twice in one lifetime, but only if. Darkness claimed her before she could complete the thought, dragging her down into depths where pain couldn't follow. The last thing she heard was Lily's voice, bright with sudden understanding. "Oh. You feel it too, don't you, Daddy? The pull. I drew this in my coloring book last week, you carrying the angel to safety. Everything's changing now, just like I said it would." And then there was only darkness, and the distant sound of a man's voice calling out orders she couldn't understand, and the feeling of strong arms lifting her with impossible gentleness. The guardian angel was finally being guarded. Chapter 2. Darius lifted Kira's limp form with a gentleness that surprised even him. She weighed nothing, skin and bones wrapped in threadbare clothing that had seen too many nights in the cold. Her head lolled against his chest, silver blonde hair matted with dirt and neglect, and he had to resist the urge to brush it from her face. What the hell is wrong with me? The thought crashed through his mind as he carried her toward the SUV. He'd come here expecting to deal with a threat, some rogue foolish enough to stalk the Alpha King's daughter. Instead, he'd found a dying girl who'd risked everything to protect Lily, and his wolf was acting like she belonged to them. "Is she going to be okay?" Lily asked, skipping alongside him with 7-year-old resilience. The tears had dried on her cheeks, replaced by bright curiosity that reminded him painfully of her mother. "I don't know," he answered honestly. Truth was a luxury he rarely afforded others, but he'd never lied to his daughter. "She's very sick." "She will be," Lily said with absolute certainty. "I drew it. She gets better and stays with us and makes you smile again." Darius's steps faltered. "Lily. I know you think it's just imagination," she interrupted, those 2 wise blue eyes meeting his. "But it's not, Daddy. I see things before they happen, just like Mommy used to." The mention of Elena hit him like a physical blow. His deceased mate had possessed the gift of prophetic dreams, a talent that had made her invaluable to the pack, and ultimately led to her death. If Lily had inherited that ability. He pushed the thought away. His daughter was 7. She drew pictures and played with dolls and asked for extra bedtime stories. She wasn't old enough to carry the burden of prophecy. But she knew I was coming today. Knew exactly when. Marcus stepped forward as they reached the vehicles, his weathered face creased with concern. Alpha? What are your orders? Pack Hospital, Darius said curtly, settling into the back seat with Kira still in his arms. And call Dr. Reeves. Tell her it's urgent. Yes, sir. Marcus's dark eyes lingered on Kira's face for a moment too long, and something flickered in his expression. Should I contact the council about the rogue situation? No. The word came out sharper than Darius intended. This stays between us for now. Marcus nodded, but Darius caught the slight tightening around his beta's eyes. In 17 years of friendship, Marcus had never questioned his decisions. The fact that he looked like he wanted to now was troubling. The drive to the hospital passed in tense silence. Lily had insisted on sitting beside them, her small hand resting protectively on Kira's arm. Every few minutes, she would lean over to whisper something in the unconscious girl's ear, reassurances, promises, fragments of dreams that made Darius's skin crawl with their accuracy. She's dreaming about fire, Lily announced suddenly. And screaming. Someone with yellow eyes is hurting people she loves. Darius went rigid. Lily, don't. She's looking for someone. A boy with her face. Lily's voice took on that eerie, distant quality that meant she was seeing beyond the present moment. He's alive, but she doesn't know. He's in a dark place with needles and pain. Stop. Darius wanted to shake his daughter, to make her stop describing things a 7-year-old should never know about. But the images she painted matched too closely with reports from his intelligence network, whispers of council experiments and disappeared wolves. Kira stirred in his arms, a low whimper escaping her lips. Her body was burning with fever, and he could feel her wolf clawing at the edges of consciousness, desperate to surface. Almost there, he murmured, not sure if he was comforting her or himself. The Pack Hospital was a study in controlled chaos when they arrived. Dr. Reeves met them at the entrance, her silver hair pulled back in its usual efficient bun and her green eyes sharp with professional focus. What do we have? She asked, falling into step beside them as they moved toward the emergency bay. Severe malnutrition, exhaustion, possible silver wolf heritage, Darius rattled off, ignoring the doctor's sharp intake of breath at the last item. She used healing power on my daughter and collapsed. Silver wolf? Dr. Reeves's voice was barely a whisper. That's impossible. They've been extinct for 2 years, Darius finished grimly. I know. They transferred Kira to an examination table, and Darius stepped back to give the medical team room to work. But he didn't leave. Couldn't leave. Something about this broken girl held him captive, made his wolf pace restlessly in his chest. Daddy? Lily tugged on his sleeve. Why do you look sad when you watch her? He knelt to his daughter's level, studying her face. What do you mean? Your eyes get the same look they had when you used to stare at Mommy's picture, Lily said matter-of-factly. Before you put it away in the drawer. Darius felt like he'd been punched. Lily. Blood pressure dropping. Dr. Reeves called out. I need 2 units of O-negative, stat. The next hour passed in a blur of medical procedures and mounting tension. Darius paced the waiting room like a caged animal while Lily colored in her ever-present sketchbook, occasionally looking up to offer cryptic observations about their patient's condition. She's fighting the medicine, Lily announced during one particularly concerning round of alarms from the treatment room. Her wolf doesn't trust it. And she was right. Every time the medical team tried to sedate Kira, her wolf would partially surface, silver light pulsing beneath her skin as her body rejected their help. I need to speak with you, Dr. Reeves said, appearing in the doorway with exhaustion etched in every line of her face. Privately. Darius arranged for one of his guards to watch Lily, then followed the doctor to her office. The moment the door closed, Dr. Reeves sank into her chair like a woman carrying the weight of the world. She's dying, the doctor said without preamble. Has been for months, maybe longer. The malnutrition is severe enough that her organs are beginning to shut down. But? Darius could hear the unspoken word hanging in the air. But she's also one of the most remarkable patients I've ever treated. Dr. Reeves pulled up a series of test results on her computer. Her blood work confirms it, she's definitely a silver wolf. The cellular markers are unmistakable. Darius studied the data, though most of it was beyond his expertise. I thought they were all gone. So did I. Dr. Reeves rubbed her temples. Darius, do you understand what this means? Silver wolves weren't just healers. They were living links to the moon goddess herself. Their blood, their power, it was the foundation of all werewolf magic. Was being the operative term, Darius said grimly. Since they're extinct. Except she's not extinct, is she? The doctor's eyes were bright with scientific fervor. She's here, and she's alive, and if we can stabilize her condition. We can what? Put her in a lab? Study her like a specimen? Darius's voice carried the dangerous edge that made grown alphas back down. She's a person, not an experiment. Dr. Reeves blinked in surprise. Of course. I didn't mean. I just meant that her survival could change everything for our kind. Before Darius could respond, alarms began blaring from the treatment room. They rushed back to find Kira convulsing on the table, her body racked with seizures as her wolf tried desperately to surface. She's fighting the shift, one of the nurses reported. Body temperature spiking, brain activity off the charts. Let her shift, Darius commanded. Sir, in her condition. Let her shift. The words carried the full weight of alpha authority, and the medical team stepped back. Kira's body rippled, bones lengthening and reshaping as silver fur erupted across her skin. But the transformation was wrong, incomplete, agonized. She was caught between forms, neither fully human nor fully wolf. And in that moment, as silver light pulsed through the room like captured moonbeams, Darius saw her wolf clearly for the first time. Recognition hit him like a physical blow. The distinctive silver coat with its pattern of darker markings along the spine. The unusual blue-silver eyes. The elegant bone structure that marked the old bloodlines. He'd seen this wolf before. 2 years ago, during the systematic elimination of the Silvermoon pack. Impossible. He'd overseen the operation himself, had walked through the aftermath to ensure no survivors. But there was no mistaking what he was seeing now. This was a Silvermoon wolf, and she was very much alive. Ethan, Kira whispered, the word barely audible as she fought her way back to human form. Have to find Ethan. Her body finally settled into human shape, and she collapsed back onto the table, unconscious but stable. The monitors showed her vital signs strengthening, as if the partial shift had somehow recharged her failing systems. Remarkable, Dr. Reeves breathed. I've never seen anything like it. But Darius wasn't listening to the doctor's amazement. His mind was racing, connecting dots he didn't want to connect. If this girl was from Silvermoon, if she'd somehow survived the purge. I need to make a call, he said abruptly, pulling out his phone. Marcus, he said when his beta answered. I need you to pull all files related to the Silvermoon operation. Specifically, I want a complete list of pack members, names, ages, family connections. Sir. That operation was classified. I know what it was, Darius cut him off. Just do it. And Marcus? I want that information in 1 hour. No delays. He ended the call and turned back to find Dr. Reeves watching him with curious eyes. You know her, the doctor said. It wasn't a question. Maybe. Darius moved to the bedside, studying Kira's pale face. In sleep, she looked even younger, 19, perhaps 20 at most. If she was from Silvermoon, she would have been barely an adult when the pack was eliminated. Keep her sedated until I return. Where are you going? To get answers. An hour later, Darius sat in his study with a stack of files spread across his desk. Marcus stood at attention across from him, but there was something in his beta's posture that set off warning bells in Darius's mind. Talk, Darius ordered. The Silvermoon pack consisted of 43 members at the time of elimination, Marcus recited from memory. All confirmed dead and accounted for. All? Yes, sir. The cleanup teams were very thorough. Darius picked up a photograph from the pile, a pack portrait taken 6 months before the operation. His eyes found what he was looking for almost immediately, a teenage girl with silver blonde hair and defiant blue eyes, standing protectively beside a younger boy who shared her distinctive features. Kira Silvermoon, he read from the file. Age 17. Daughter of Alpha Jeremiah Silvermoon. One sibling, Ethan Silvermoon, age 14. He looked up at Marcus. Both listed as casualties. Marcus's expression remained carefully neutral. The intelligence was accurate at the time, Alpha. Was it? Darius stood, moving to the window that overlooked the hospital. Because one of those casualties just spent the evening in my medical facility. Sir? The girl. She's Kira Silvermoon. Darius turned back to face his beta, studying Marcus's reaction carefully. Which means either my cleanup teams were incompetent, or someone deliberately falsified the reports. For just a moment, barely a heartbeat, something flickered in Marcus's eyes. Fear? Guilt? The expression was gone so quickly Darius might have imagined it. That's disturbing, Alpha, Marcus said slowly. If there are Silvermoon survivors unaccounted for, then we have a problem, Darius finished. I want you to investigate. Find out how this happened, and more importantly, find out if there are others. Of course, Alpha. I'll begin immediately. But as Marcus turned to leave, Darius caught something in his beta's scent, the faint but unmistakable aroma of deception. Marcus was hiding something, and that terrified Darius more than he cared to admit. Because if Marcus had been compromised, if his most trusted advisor was keeping secrets about Silvermoon survivors, then everything Darius thought he knew about that night 2 years ago was a lie. And somewhere out there, Ethan Silvermoon might still be alive. If you are enjoying this video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Chapter 3. Kira woke to silk sheets and the scent of pine forests, her body cocooned in luxury she'd forgotten existed. For a moment, she floated in the space between sleep and consciousness, her mind cataloging sensations, soft mattress beneath her back, warm sunlight streaming through tall windows, the distant sound of children's laughter. Then memory crashed over her like a tsunami, and she bolted upright with a gasp. The room spun violently, forcing her to grip the edges of the massive 4-poster bed until her knuckles went white. She wasn't in the abandoned playground. She wasn't dying on cold concrete with Lily's worried face hovering over her. She was in the Alpha King's mansion. Prisoner, her wolf snarled, pacing restlessly beneath her skin. Trapped. Kira swung her legs over the side of the bed, testing her strength. 3 days of 4 fluids and proper nutrition had worked miracles. She felt more solid than she had in months, though still far from her former power. Her reflection in the mirror across the room showed a stranger, clean hair that gleamed silver gold in the sunlight, skin with actual color instead of the sickly pallor of starvation, clothes that fit properly instead of hanging like rags. She looked almost human again. The thought should have been comforting. You're awake. The deep voice from the doorway made her spin around, every instinct screaming danger. Darius Blackthorne leaned against the doorframe with deceptive casualness, but Kira could see the predatory tension in his shoulders, the way his dark eyes tracked her every movement. He'd changed from the expensive suit of 3 days ago into jeans and a black sweater that emphasized the dangerous power of his frame. Where am I? She demanded, hating how her voice came out rough and uncertain. My home. He stepped into the room, and Kira had to resist the urge to back away. You're safe here. Am I? She lifted her chin, meeting his gaze with all the defiance she could muster. Because last I checked, being held against your will was the definition of imprisonment, not safety. Something that might have been amusement flickered in his dark eyes. You're free to leave whenever you choose. Though I should mention that you're currently about 20 miles from the nearest town, and the surrounding forest is patrolled by my pack. So I'm trapped. You're protected. His voice carried an edge that made her wolf whimper. There are things hunting silver wolves, Kira. Things that would do far worse to you than offer you a comfortable room and 3 meals a day. The use of her name sent a chill down her spine. How do you know who you are? Darius moved closer, and she caught his scent, pine and leather, power and something darker that made her body react in ways she didn't want to analyze. Kira Silvermoon, daughter of Alpha Jeremiah, sister to Ethan. Presumed dead for 2 years. The mention of her brother's name hit her like a physical blow. Ethan's not dead. No. Darius's head tilted slightly, and she realized she'd walked straight into his trap. Then where is he? Kira clamped her lips shut, cursing herself for the slip. She'd spent 2 years learning to keep secrets, to reveal nothing that could be used against her. But something about this man made her want to spill everything, the loneliness, the desperate search, the hope that kept her alive when death would have been easier. Mate bond, her wolf whispered, and Kira shoved the thought away viciously. She'd had a mate. She'd watched him die in the massacre, had felt their bonds sever like a blade through her heart. Whatever she was feeling for Darius Blackthorne was just trauma and proximity and the desperate need for connection. I don't know, she lied. Try again. His voice dropped to that dangerous register that made alpha commands feel like suggestions. I can smell deception on you, Kira. It's not particularly attractive. And I can smell arrogance on you, she shot back, taking a step toward him instead of away. It's not particularly attractive either. For a moment, they stood frozen in a standoff that crackled with tension. Then Darius smiled, a slow, predatory curve of lips that did terrible things to her pulse rate. There she is, he murmured. I was wondering when the real Kira Silvermoon would show up. Before she could ask what he meant, the door burst open and Lily tumbled into the room, arms full of art supplies and chattering a mile a minute. You're awake. I told Daddy you would be, but he was being all grumbly and worried like he gets when he thinks too much. She dumped her supplies on the bed and threw her arms around Kira's waist. Are you feeling better? Do you like your room? I picked out the flowers for the vase myself. The innocent affection in the child's embrace nearly undid her. Kira hugged Lily back, breathing in the sweet scent of shampoo and innocence, trying to ignore the way Darius watched them with an unreadable expression. I'm much better, thank you, Kira said softly. And the flowers are beautiful. Want to see my pictures? Lily was already spreading sheets of paper across the bed. I've been drawing lots of things. Some of them are about you. Kira looked down at the artwork and felt her blood turn to ice. The drawings were too detailed for a 7-year-old, too accurate. One showed 3 black cars surrounding a playground. Another depicted a silver wolf protecting a small girl from grotesque shapes with yellow eyes. But it was the third drawing that made Kira's hands shake, a perfect rendering of herself and Darius standing in what looked like this very room, their bodies positioned in a way that suggested intimacy, their faces turned toward each other with expressions of longing. Lily, Darius said carefully, why don't you show Kira the game you told me about? Oh yes. Lily bounced on her toes. It's the best game ever. I draw pictures of things that haven't happened yet, and then they do happen. Like magic. Prophetic sight. The realization hit Kira like a sledgehammer. She'd heard stories about children born with the gift, but she'd never met one. They were rarer than silver wolves, more precious than gold, and infinitely more dangerous. Watch. Lily grabbed a fresh sheet of paper and began sketching with rapid, sure strokes. This one's about dinner tonight. The image that emerged showed the 3 of them sitting at a large dining table. Darius looked tense, Kira appeared defensive, and Lily sat between them with a knowing smile. Even rendered in crayon, the scene radiated uncomfortable tension. That's... Kira struggled for words. That's incredible, Lily. Daddy says it's just coincidence, Lily said with a child's matter-of-fact acceptance of adult stupidity. But I know it's real. Mommy used to have the same dreams before she died. The casual mention of death from such a young child sent another chill through Kira. She looked up to find Darius watching his daughter with a mixture of love and bone-deep worry that made her chest ache. He's terrified for her, she realized. He knows what having that gift means. Lily, Darius said gently, why don't you go help Mrs. Chen with dinner preparations? I need to speak with Kira privately. About boring grown-up stuff? Lily wrinkled her nose. About boring grown-up stuff, he confirmed. After Lily skipped out with her characteristic boundless energy, silence settled over the room like a heavy blanket. Kira found herself acutely aware of Darius's presence, of the way he seemed to fill every available space with his dark intensity. She inherited her mother's gift, Darius said finally. And you're terrified, Kira observed. His jaw tightened. Prophetic children don't typically live long, peaceful lives. There are too many people who want to use them, control them, exploit their abilities for personal gain. People like the council? The question slipped out before she could stop it, but Darius's reaction told her she'd hit the mark. His entire body went rigid, and those dark eyes fixed on her with laser intensity. What do you know about the council? I know they have red eyes and make Alpha Kings nervous, Kira said, thinking of Lily's casual mention the day before. I know they've been to your home recently, which means they're interested in something you have. Or someone. Darius moved closer, and Kira felt trapped between his presence and the bed at her back. Tell me about the night Silvermoon fell. The change of subject was so abrupt it left her reeling. What? The massacre. I want to know what you remember. Everything. The words stuck in her throat as images flashed through her mind, fire and screaming, the acrid smell of silver bullets, her father's lifeless eyes staring at nothing. Her brother's terrified face as strangers dragged him away. I don't remember much, she lied. It was dark. Chaotic. Liar. Darius's hand came up to rest against the wall beside her head, effectively caging her in. You remember everything, don't you? Every sound, every scent, every face. She did. God help her, she did. They came at night, she whispered, and once the words started, she couldn't stop them. Professional soldiers, not rogues. They knew exactly where to go, who to target first. They killed the sentries silently, disabled our communications, trapped us in the compound before anyone could escape. Darius's face remained impassive, but she caught a flicker of something in his eyes. Guilt? Pain? They separated the families, she continued, lost in the nightmare of memory. Adults in one group, children in another. They shot the adults with silver bullets, quick, efficient executions. But the children. She shuddered. They loaded the children into trucks. I only escaped because I was in the woods with Ethan when it started. And Ethan? They took him. The words came out broken, raw with 2 years of anguish. I tried to follow, but there were too many of them. By the time I found help, the trucks were gone. Darius was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was carefully neutral. The official report said it was a rogue attack. Something in his tone made her look up sharply. Official reports? He straightened, putting distance between them. Dinner's at 7. Don't be late. He was halfway to the door before she found her voice. That's it? You dragged the story out of me and then just leave? For now. He paused at the threshold, not looking back. There are things you need to see. Things that will help you understand. But not yet. After he left, Kira sank onto the bed, her hands shaking with delayed reaction. She'd never spoken about that night to anyone, had kept the memories locked away like poison in her heart. But something about Darius's questions, the way he'd listened. He knows something, her wolf insisted. Something about that night. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Come in. Mrs. Chen, the housekeeper, appeared with an armload of clothes. The Alpha thought you might want something more suitable for dinner, she said with a kind smile. The dress was simple but elegant, deep blue silk that complemented her coloring and fit as if it had been made for her. When Kira looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. For the first time in 2 years, she looked like the Alpha's daughter she'd once been. Dangerous, her wolf warned. He's trying to make you forget who you are. But as she made her way down to dinner, Kira couldn't shake the feeling that Darius Blackthorne was trying to help her remember who she'd been, and possibly discover who she was meant to become. The dining room was as elegant as the rest of the mansion, with a table that could easily seat 20 but was set intimately for 3. Darius stood when she entered, and she caught the way his eyes tracked over her appearance with obvious appreciation. "You look beautiful," he said simply. The compliment hit her like a physical blow. She couldn't remember the last time anyone had called her beautiful, had looked at her as anything other than a threat or a curiosity. "Thank you." She took her seat, hyper-aware of his presence across from her. Lily chattered throughout the meal, filling the silence with stories about her tutors and the pact children she played with. But beneath the surface conversation, Kira felt the weight of Darius's attention, the way he studied her reactions to his daughter's innocent observations. "Tell me about your training," he said when Lily paused to take a bite. "Before Silvermoon fell." "The usual." Kira kept her voice carefully neutral. "Combat, tactics, pack dynamics." "Show me." "I'm sorry." "Tomorrow morning. Training grounds. I want to see what you can do." It wasn't a request. Kira bristled at the command in his voice, but before she could object, Lily piped up. "Oh, you'll like the training grounds. That's where Daddy teaches the warriors to fight. He's really good at it." "I'm sure he is," Kira murmured, not missing the way Darius's lips quirked at her dry tone. After dinner, Lily insisted on showing Kira around the mansion. It was massive, elegant, and filled with the kind of security measures that spoke of serious threats. But it was the study that made Kira's blood run cold. One wall was covered with newspaper clippings, all relating to the Silvermoon massacre. The headlines screamed variations of the same theme: Rogue Pack destroys Silvermoon settlement. 37 dead in werewolf attack. Alpha King increases border patrols after tragedy. But as Kira read the articles more carefully, inconsistencies began to emerge. Witnesses who described the attackers as too organized for rogues. Evidence that suggested military-grade weapons and tactics. Questions that had been raised and then mysteriously dropped. "The official story," she said quietly. "Yes." Darius's voice came from the doorway, and she realized he'd been watching her read. "But not the truth." "Then what is the truth?" "That's what I'm trying to figure out." He moved to stand beside her, and she caught his scent again, that intoxicating mixture of power and something uniquely him that made her body betray her mind's cautions. Whoever ordered the hit on Silvermoon had resources, connections, and a very specific agenda. "You mean the council?" "I mean someone with enough influence to make an Alpha King dance to their tune." The admission clearly cost him. "Someone who wanted your pack eliminated for reasons that had nothing to do with territory or politics." Before Kira could respond, Lily appeared in the doorway with a fresh drawing clutched in her small hands. "I made another picture," she announced, oblivious to the tension in the room. "This one's really important." She held up the paper, and Kira's world tilted sideways. The drawing showed a boy with silver blonde hair and familiar blue eyes, chained to a wall in what looked like an underground cell. His face was older, harder than she remembered, but there was no mistaking those features. At the bottom of the page, written in Lily's careful 7-year-old handwriting, were 3 words that stopped Kira's heart. "He's still alive." Chapter 4. Kira stared at Lily's drawing until the lines blurred together, her hands trembling as she traced the careful crayon strokes that depicted her brother's face. 2 years. 2 years of believing Ethan was dead, of carrying that guilt like a stone in her chest, and all this time he'd been alive. Suffering. Waiting for her to find him. "Where is this place?" she whispered, not trusting her voice above a whisper. Lily tilted her head, studying her own artwork with the serious concentration of a 7-year-old artist. "I don't know. It's dark and smells like metal and sadness. There are other children there too, but they're not like him. They're..." She scrunched up her face. "Broken." "Lily, that's enough," Darius said sharply, but Kira was already on her knees in front of the child, gripping her small shoulders perhaps too tightly. Other children? How many? What do they look like? Kira. Darius's voice carried the weight of alpha command, but she ignored him. Please, Lily. This is my brother. I have to find him. Those impossibly blue eyes regarded her with an understanding far beyond her years. They have silver in their hair, like you. But their eyes are wrong, too bright, like they hurt to look at. And they have marks on their arms where the needles go. The blood drained from Kira's face. Silver wolves. Other silver wolves, kept alive for some horrific purpose, experimented on, tortured. That's enough. Darius's hands closed over hers, gently but firmly pulling her back to her feet. Lily, go to your room. It's past your bedtime. But I want to help. Room. Now. There was no arguing with that tone. Lily gathered her drawings and scampered out, but not before pressing the picture of Ethan into Kira's hands. The moment they were alone, Kira whirled on Darius. You know about this. You know where they are. I have suspicions, he said carefully. But nothing concrete. Nothing actionable. Then we make it actionable. She stepped closer, desperation making her bold. You have resources, connections, an entire pack at your disposal. Help me find him. Why would I do that? His dark eyes were unreadable. What's in it for me? The question hit her like a slap. For a moment, she'd forgotten who she was dealing with, not some sympathetic stranger, but the Alpha King, a man who'd built his empire on calculated decisions and strategic alliances. I'll do anything, she said quietly. Name your price. Something flickered in his expression, surprise, perhaps, or something darker. Anything? Anything. He was quiet for a long moment, studying her with that predatory intensity that made her skin prickle with awareness. Join my pack. What? The bonding ceremony. Full integration. His voice was matter-of-fact, as if he'd suggested something as simple as sharing a meal. You become mine, completely and permanently. My wolf, my responsibility, my asset. The word hung in the air between them, loaded with implications she didn't want to examine too closely. And in return? I find your brother. Kira closed her eyes, weighing her options. Pack bonding wasn't something to be entered into lightly. It would bind her to Darius and his wolves on a level deeper than blood, deeper than choice. She would be his in ways that had nothing to do with physical ownership and everything to do with spiritual connection. But Ethan was alive. Her little brother, who'd been only 14 when they took him, was somewhere in the darkness waiting for her to save him. When? She asked. Tomorrow night. The full moon makes the bonding stronger. She opened her eyes to find him watching her intently. You planned this. You knew exactly what you were going to ask for. I'm an Alpha King, Kira. I don't make decisions based on impulse. His lips curved in a smile that didn't reach his eyes. But I am curious to see what memories the bonding reveals. Pack bonds have a way of illuminating hidden truths. Something in his tone sent a chill down her spine, but she pushed the feeling aside. Whatever games Darius Blackthorne was playing, whatever secrets he was keeping, none of it mattered if it brought her closer to finding Ethan. Fine, she said. But I have conditions. You're hardly in a position to make demands. Aren't I? She lifted her chin, meeting his gaze with all the defiance she could muster. I'm the last free silver wolf in existence. That makes me valuable to a lot of people, including your mysterious council friends. So yes, I think I am in a position to make demands. For a moment, she thought he might refuse. Then that dangerous smile widened into something that was almost approving. What conditions? When we find Ethan, he comes back with me. No questions, no complications. And if there are other silver wolves being held, we rescue them too. Agreed. And Lily stays out of this. Whatever we're walking into, your daughter doesn't get involved. His expression hardened. That's not negotiable. Lily stays safe, always. Then we understand each other. The next evening, Kira found herself standing in a circle of Darius's inner pack, surrounded by werewolves whose loyalty to their alpha ran deeper than blood. The bonding ceremony was unlike anything she'd experienced, where Silvermoon's rituals had been warm, familial affairs. This felt ancient and dangerous, charged with power that made her wolf pace restlessly beneath her skin. Are you ready? Darius asked, his voice carrying easily across the clearing despite the crackling of the ceremonial fire. Kira nodded, not trusting her voice. She'd participated in pack bondings before, but always as a witness, never as the one being integrated. She knew what to expect: the sharing of memories, the establishment of psychic links, the surrender of individual will to collective purpose. What she hadn't expected was the intensity of Darius's mental presence when the bond snapped into place. His consciousness crashed into hers like a tidal wave, carrying with it a torrent of images and emotions and experiences that weren't her own. She saw his childhood, lonely despite being surrounded by pack, shaped by duty rather than love. His rise to power through conquest and careful political maneuvering. The deaths of rivals who'd underestimated his ruthlessness. And then, buried deeper, she found the memories he'd tried to hide. Elena. The name whispered through the bond, carrying with it a grief so profound it nearly drove Kira to her knees. She saw her, Darius's mate, silver-haired and laughing, her belly round with pregnancy. Saw their happiness, their plans for the future, the way Darius's hard edges softened when he looked at her. Then came the night she died. Not childbirth, Kira realized with growing horror. Murder. The images were fragmented, distorted by trauma and suppressed rage. Men in dark clothing. Elena's screams. Blood on silver hair. And through it all, the knowledge that this wasn't random violence. This was a message, a warning, a demonstration of power. They killed her because she was Silver Wolf. They killed her to control you. But there was more. Deeper in Darius's psyche, locked away behind walls of guilt and self-loathing, she found the memory that changed everything. 2 years ago. A conference room filled with shadows. Voices that carried the weight of centuries. The Silvermoon pack has served its purpose, someone said, a voice like silk over steel, beautiful and terrible. It's time to harvest what we've planted. All of them? Darius's voice, but younger somehow. Less certain. Every last one. We cannot risk contamination. And if I refuse? Laughter, cold and merciless. Then we'll add your daughter to our collection. Such a pretty child, and with her mother's gift, she'd be quite useful to us. The threat hung in the air like poison. Darius's hands clenched into fists beneath the conference table. How do you want it done? The memory shattered as Kira jerked back to the present, gasping for breath. Around the circle, the other pack members watched with concerned expressions, but all she could see was Darius's face, etched with pain and something that looked like relief. He knows I saw it, she realized. He wanted me to see it. The rest of the ceremony passed in a blur. When it was over, Kira found herself bound to Darius's pack in ways that went beyond conscious thought. She could feel them all, their emotions and intentions flowing beneath the surface of her mind like an underground river. But it was Darius's presence that dominated, his psychic signature woven through hers so completely that she couldn't tell where she ended and he began. We need to talk, she said quietly as the pack began to disperse. He nodded, leading her away from the clearing toward a path that wound deeper into the forest. They walked in silence until they reached a small cabin, isolated and private, with windows that looked out over moonlit water. Your mate, Kira said without preamble. They killed her. Yes. And you've been hunting them ever since. Yes. She turned to face him, studying the harsh planes of his face in the silver light. That's why you agreed to destroy Silvermoon. They threatened Lily. For a moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then his shoulders sagged, and she saw through their bond how much the admission cost him. They had photographs, he said quietly. Pictures of Elena's body, with a note explaining exactly what they'd do to Lily if I didn't comply. His hands clenched into fists. I had a choice, sacrifice one pack, or watch my daughter suffer the same fate as her mother. So you chose us. I chose her. His dark eyes met hers, blazing with a mixture of guilt and defiance. I would make the same choice again. The honesty of it hit her like a physical blow. She'd expected lies, justifications, attempts to minimize his role in her pack's destruction. Instead, she got brutal truth and a man who'd been as trapped by circumstances as she had been. The children, she said. The ones they took. That's what they really wanted, wasn't it? Silver wolf children are rare. Precious. Their blood, their power. He ran a hand through his dark hair. I don't know exactly what they're doing with them, but I have suspicions. Creating an army? Or something worse. He moved to the window, staring out at the water with haunted eyes. I've been searching for 2 years, trying to find where they took the survivors. Every lead goes nowhere. Every raid comes back empty. As if summoned by his words, the sound of engines filled the night air. Through the trees, Kira could see the headlights of returning vehicles, Marcus and his search team, back from another fruitless mission. He's been leading the hunts, Darius continued, watching the approaching vehicles. My best tracker, my most trusted beta. If anyone could find them, it would be Marcus. But there was something in his tone, a note of frustration that suggested not all was as it seemed. Through their new bond, Kira could feel his growing doubts, the questions that kept him awake at night. They made their way back to the main house, where Marcus was already waiting in the study. His weathered face was drawn with exhaustion, his clothes dusty from travel. Any luck? Darius asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. Another dead end, Marcus reported. The facility we raided was abandoned, had been for months. Whoever's running these operations, they're always one step ahead of us. Kira studied the beta's face, looking for tells, for any sign of deception. But Marcus was either an exceptional actor or genuinely frustrated by their lack of progress. What about the other locations on our list? Darius pressed. We'll keep trying, Alpha. But... Marcus shook his head. It's like they know we're coming. After Marcus left, Kira and Darius returned to the uncomfortable privacy of his study. The newspaper clippings about Silvermoon seemed to mock them from the walls, reminders of how completely they'd all been manipulated. There's something else, Kira said, remembering fragments from their bonding. In your memories. You mentioned someone above Alpha Kings. Darius went very still. You saw that? Fragments. Impressions. She moved closer, drawn by the pain radiating through their bond. Who are they, Darius? Who has enough power to make you dance to their tune? For a long moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he seemed to come to some internal decision, his shoulders squaring as he met her gaze. They call themselves the Council of Shadows, he said quietly. Ancient werewolves who've been pulling strings from the darkness for centuries. They don't rule through territory or traditional pack structures, they rule through fear, manipulation, and the systematic elimination of anyone who poses a threat to their power. And silver wolves pose a threat. Silver wolves are connected to the moon goddess herself. Their power doesn't come from pack bonds or territorial dominance, it comes from something older, something the council can't control or predict. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. They've been hunting your kind for generations, capturing some, killing others, always working to ensure that silver wolves never reach their full potential. The pieces were falling into place now, creating a picture that was both terrible and illuminating. That's why they wanted Silvermoon eliminated. Not because we were a threat militarily, but because we were beginning to understand what we really were. Your father was researching the old bloodlines, trying to reconnect with the traditional silver wolf powers. Darius nodded grimly. The council couldn't allow that knowledge to spread. And now they have Ethan. The realization hit her like a physical blow. They have my brother, and God knows how many other children, and they're using them for experiments. Which is why we're going to find them, Darius said firmly. And when we do, we're going to make them pay for every life they've destroyed. The promise in his voice sent heat through her veins, and suddenly the space between them seemed charged with more than just shared purpose. He stepped closer, his hand coming up to cup her face with surprising gentleness. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "For Silvermoon, for your family, for the choice I had to make. If there had been any other way." She silenced him by rising on her toes and pressing her lips to his. The kiss was meant to be comfort, forgiveness, a bridge between their shared pain. But the moment their mouths met, something ignited between them that had nothing to do with comfort and everything to do with the desperate need for connection. His arms came around her, pulling her against his chest as he deepened the kiss. Through their bond, she could feel his hunger, his loneliness, the way her touch seemed to quiet the demons that had haunted him for 2 years. The sharp ring of his phone shattered the moment. Darius pulled back with a curse, his breathing ragged as he reached for the device. "What?" he snapped into the phone. Kira watched his expression change, saw the blood drain from his face as he listened to whatever crisis demanded his attention. "When?" he asked sharply. "How many?" He ended the call and turned to face her, his eyes blazing with a mixture of fury and fear that made her stomach clench. "What is it?" "3 more packs hit tonight," he said grimly. "All with Silver Wolf bloodlines, all completely eliminated. And this time, they left a message." He handed her his phone, where a text message glowed on the screen. "The hunt is accelerating. Soon we'll have enough to complete the work. Thank your mate for her cooperation in our efforts. CS." Kira stared at the message, ice forming in her veins. "They know. About us, about the bonding. Which means they've been watching. Waiting." Darius's face was granite, his alpha power radiating through the room like heat from a forge. "And now they're moving to end this before we can stop them." The phone rang again. This time, when Darius answered, his expression shifted from anger to something approaching panic. "Lily's room," he said, already moving toward the door. "She's gone." If you are enjoying this video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Chapter 5. The sound of footsteps pounding upstairs echoed through the mansion as Darius led a team of his best warriors toward Lily's room. Kira's heart hammered against her ribs as she followed, the pact bond carrying waves of his terror and rage through her system like electric shocks. Lily's bedroom door stood open, revealing chaos within. Furniture overturned, windows shattered, and the distinctive acrid smell of fierce sweat lingering in the air. But no blood. No signs of struggle. "She went willingly," Darius said, his voice hollow with disbelief. "Why would she go willingly?" Kira moved to the destroyed desk where Lily's art supplies lay scattered. Among the broken crayons and torn paper, one drawing remained intact, a perfect rendering of Marcus carrying a small girl through darkness, his face twisted with something that might have been regret. "Because she knew," Kira whispered, holding up the drawing. "She saw it coming and didn't fight because she knew it had to happen this way." Marcus appeared in the doorway, his face a mask of concern that didn't quite hide something else, something that made Kira's wolf snarl with recognition. "Alpha, we've secured the perimeter. No sign of forced entry, no trace sense. It's like she just disappeared." Through the pact bond, Kira felt Darius's suspicion crystallize into terrible certainty. His power lashed out without warning, slamming Marcus against the wall with enough force to crack the plaster. "Where is she?" Darius's voice carried the full weight of alpha dominance, a command that should have compelled immediate obedience from any pack member. But Marcus just smiled, and in that expression, Kira saw the truth that had been hiding in plain sight for 2 years. "Safe," Marcus said, making no attempt to struggle against the invisible force pinning him to the wall. "For now. The council has very specific plans for the prophet child." The words hit Darius like physical blows. "How long?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "How long have you been working for them?" "Since before Elena died." Marcus's admission sent shockwaves through the assembled warriors. "Since before Lily was born. Did you think it was coincidence that your mate happened to be Silver Wolf?" That she found her way to you just when the council needed leverage over the most powerful alpha in North America? Kira watched Darius's face crumble as the full scope of the betrayal became clear. Every major decision, every strategic move, every attempt to hunt for the missing children, Marcus had been there, guiding, advising, reporting back to shadowy masters. Elena, Darius breathed. Was already pregnant when they introduced her to you, Marcus continued with clinical detachment. The child was always the prize, Darius. Everything else, the romance, the mating, even Elena's death, was just theater to ensure your cooperation. The Alpha King's roar of rage shattered every window in the room. Power erupted from him in waves, a psychic explosion that sent furniture flying and drove every wolf present to their knees. Everyone except Marcus, who remained suspended against the wall, still smiling that horrible, knowing smile. Where are they? Darius demanded. Moving, Marcus replied. Always moving. But don't worry, when the time comes, you'll know exactly where to find them. After all, we need you to bring us what we really want. His gaze shifted to Kira, and she felt ice form in her veins. The last free silver wolf, Marcus said softly. The missing piece of our grand design. Before anyone could react, smoke began pouring through the broken windows, thick, unnatural fog that carried the scent of dark magic and something else, something that made Kira's wolf whimper with instinctive fear. Enhanced rogues, Marcus said conversationally as the sound of breaking glass echoed from the lower floors. A little gift from your brother, Kira. His blood makes such interesting improvements to ordinary wolves. Ethan. The name pierced her heart like a silver blade. What have you done to him? Made him useful. Marcus's expression shifted to something that might have been pity. Though I suspect he won't thank us for it. The mansion erupted into warfare. Through the pack bond, Kira felt the shock and terror of Darius's warriors as they encountered enemies unlike any they'd faced before. These weren't ordinary rogues, they moved with inhuman speed and coordination, their strength amplified beyond anything natural. And they all smelled like silver. We have to move, Darius said, his voice cutting through the chaos with trained authority. Safe room. Now. But Marcus was already gone, having disappeared into the smoke with the supernatural grace of someone who'd planned this moment down to the last detail. In the distance, Kira could hear him calling out orders to the attacking forces, his voice carrying the confidence of someone who held all the cards. The retreat to Darius's reinforced safe room became a running battle through corridors filled with smoke and violence. The enhanced rogues fought with a fury that bordered on mindless, but beneath their savage exterior, Kira caught glimpses of something that made her soul ache, traces of the children they'd once been, before the council's experiments had turned them into weapons. They were like Ethan, she realized with growing horror. Silver wolf children, twisted and broken and used. The safe room was a marvel of paranoid engineering, reinforced walls, independent air supply, and enough weapons to outfit a small army. As Darius sealed the door behind them, the sounds of battle became muffled but didn't disappear entirely. How long can we hold out here? Kira asked. Indefinitely, if necessary. Darius moved to a bank of monitors that showed feeds from throughout the mansion. The enhanced rogues were methodically destroying everything they could find, but they weren't trying to breach the safe room. But I don't think that's what they want. On the screens, they could see Marcus directing the search with casual efficiency. He wasn't looking for them, he was looking for something else. Your research, Kira realized. The files about the council, about silver wolf bloodlines. Already destroyed. Darius's jaw was tight with controlled fury. I burned everything the moment I realized what we were dealing with. A new voice echoed through the mansion's intercom system, cultured, ancient, carrying the weight of centuries. Alpha King Blackthorne, the voice said, silk over steel. How pleasant to finally speak directly. I am Council Prime, and I believe we have much to discuss. Darius's hand moved to a hidden panel, activating the mansion's emergency broadcast system. I have nothing to say to you. Laughter, cold and amused. Oh, but I think you do. Especially when you learn what we've accomplished with young Ethan Silvermoon. The monitors flickered, and new images appeared, a sterile laboratory filled with tanks and medical equipment. In the center of the room, suspended in some kind of liquid medium, floated a figure that made Kira's heart stop. Ethan. But not the 14-year-old boy she remembered. This version of her brother was older, larger, his body marked with surgical scars and strange tattoos that pulsed with silver light. His eyes were open, staring at nothing, and there was no recognition in them, no humanity left at all. 2 years of careful enhancement, the voice continued conversationally. Silver wolf blood is remarkably adaptable, you know. With the right treatments, it can be concentrated, refined, weaponized. Your brother has been instrumental in our research. You bastards, Kira whispered, her hands pressed against the monitor as if she could reach through and pull Ethan to safety. Language, my dear. Though I suppose your distress is understandable. After all, Ethan's transformation is nothing compared to what we have planned for you. The image changed again, showing a room full of enhanced rogues, dozens of them, all bearing the silver-touched features of wolves who'd been exposed to Ethan's modified blood. An army of synthetic silver wolves, Council Prime explained with obvious pride. All the power of your bloodline, none of the inconvenient independence. They follow orders perfectly, feel no pain, experience no fear. In many ways, they're superior to the original design. Darius's hand found hers, his fingers intertwining with hers in a gesture of comfort and shared determination. Through their bond, she felt his rage burning like a cold fire, controlled but absolute. What do you want? Darius asked. Simple. Kira Silvermoon, delivered to us unharmed within 24 hours. In exchange, we'll return your daughter and spare your pack from immediate destruction. And Ethan? Is no longer your concern. He belongs to us now, body and soul. The monitors went dark, leaving them alone with the terrible weight of impossible choices. We can't trust them, Kira said, though her voice lacked conviction. Even if I surrender, they'll kill Lily anyway. Yes, Darius agreed. They will. But we can't leave her with them either. No. We can't. They stood in silence for a moment, both understanding that they were trapped in a game where all the rules had been written by their enemies. There is another option, Darius said finally. It's insane, suicidal, and will probably get us all killed. I'm listening. He moved to another panel, revealing a hidden armory that made the safe room's visible weapons look like toys. Military-grade assault rifles, grenades, body armor, everything needed to wage war against supernatural enemies. We go after them, he said simply. All of them. The enhanced rogues, the council, everyone responsible for this nightmare. Just the two of us? And every pack that's lost children to these monsters. His eyes blazed with fierce determination. I've been building a coalition, quietly reaching out to other alphas who've suffered losses. They're ready to fight, they just needed someone to lead them. The idea was audacious, terrifying, and probably doomed to failure. But as Kira looked at the image of her transformed brother still burned into her memory, she realized that death in battle would be preferable to a lifetime of knowing she'd failed to save him. How do we find them? Marcus will lead us right to them. Darius's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. He thinks he's won, thinks he's got us exactly where the council wants us. But he's forgotten something important. What's that? I'm not just an alpha king. I'm a father whose child has been taken. His power filled the room, ancient and terrible and absolutely unforgiving. And there is no force in heaven or hell that will keep me from getting her back. The sound of engines filled the night as vehicles began arriving at the mansion, pack members responding to the emergency calls, other alphas who'd been waiting for this moment. Through the monitors, they could see the enhanced rogues retreating, their mission apparently complete. They're leaving, Kira observed. Because they got what they came for. Darius's expression was grim. Not just information or destruction, they got us exactly where they want us. Desperate, angry, and ready to make mistakes. Then we don't give them what they expect. Kira began selecting weapons from the armory, her movements precise and deadly. We give them war. As if in response to her words, her phone buzzed with an incoming message. The number was unknown, but the content made her blood run cold. Sister mine, how good to see you again. I've missed you terribly during my education. The council has such interesting ideas about family reunions. Perhaps we'll have a chance to catch up soon. Your loving brother, E. Beneath the text was a photograph, Ethan standing in what looked like the same laboratory they'd seen on the monitors. But this version of him was awake, aware, and smiling with an expression that held no warmth at all. It's not him, Kira whispered. Whatever they've done, whoever's wearing his face, it's not my brother anymore. Then we'll save who we can, Darius said firmly. And we'll make sure no other family suffers what ours have. The war for the future of their kind was about to begin, and neither of them had any illusions about the cost of victory. But as they prepared to face an enemy that had been planning this moment for centuries, they had something the council hadn't counted on. They had nothing left to lose. Chapter 6. The entrance to hell was hidden beneath a children's playground. Kira crouched in the shadows of the rusted swing set, watching Darius's coalition forces take position around the innocuous park that sat above the council's primary research facility. 43 alphas had answered his call, leaders who'd lost packs, children, mates to the council's systematic harvesting. They moved through the darkness like ghosts, driven by shared grief and the promise of vengeance. Thermal imaging confirms at least 60 enhanced rogues inside. Marcus's replacement, a gruff alpha named Victor, whispered through the comm system. Plus unknown numbers of council members and civilian prisoners. Civilian prisoners. The clinical term for silver wolf children being tortured in the name of science. Remember, Darius's voice carried clearly through the night air, we're not here for glory or revenge. We're here for the children. Everything else is secondary. But Kira could feel the lie in those words through their pack bond. This was absolutely about revenge, for Elena, for Silvermoon, for every life the council had destroyed in their centuries-long manipulation of werewolf society. The entry point was a maintenance shed that looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. But when Darius placed his palm against a hidden scanner, the floor split apart to reveal a staircase descending into darkness. Motion sensors are disabled, Victor reported. We have maybe 10 minutes before they notice the system breach. 10 minutes to penetrate a facility that had taken decades to build. 10 minutes to find Lily and Ethan among God knew how many levels of underground hell. Teams Alpha and Beta take the main corridors, Darius ordered as they descended. Gamma and Delta hit the outer passages. Everyone else with me, we're going straight to the heart of this place. The facility was a masterpiece of paranoid architecture. Corridors branched and twisted like veins, leading deeper into the earth than should have been possible. The walls were lined with some kind of metal that made Kira's wolf recoil, not silver, but something that interfered with supernatural senses, making it nearly impossible to track sense or detect life signs. They built this place to contain us, she realized. Every inch designed to neutralize werewolf advantages. Emergency lighting cast everything in hellish red, and the air carried scents that made her stomach turn, fear, pain, chemicals, and underneath it all, the sweet sick smell of silver wolf blood. The first laboratory they found was empty except for equipment that belonged in nightmares. Operating tables with restraint systems designed for supernatural strength. Tanks filled with unknown liquids. Walls covered with charts tracking bloodline modifications and genetic compatibility. Jesus, one of the other alphas breathed. What were they doing here? But Kira was already moving deeper into the complex, drawn by something that called to her on a level beyond conscious thought. Through their pack bond, she felt Darius following, his presence a steady anchor in the madness surrounding them. The second laboratory wasn't empty. Cages lined both walls, dozens of them, each containing a child who might once have been Silver Wolf. Some bore the telltale silver streaks in their hair, others showed the modified features that marked council experimentation. All of them looked at the rescue team with eyes that held too much knowledge and not enough hope. My God, Darius whispered. There are so many of them. A small girl, maybe 6 years old, pressed her face against the bars of her cage. Are you here to take us to the pain room? She asked with heartbreaking matter-of-factness. Kira felt something shatter inside her chest. No, sweetheart. We're here to take you home. The extraction teams moved with practiced efficiency, using modified tools to break locks that had been designed to hold supernatural strength. But as the children emerged from their cages, Kira realized they faced a new problem. Many of them were too weak to walk, too traumatized to trust, too damaged by whatever had been done to them to understand that rescue was really happening. We need more time, Victor reported over the comm. These kids can't move fast enough for a fighting retreat. Then we make time, Darius replied grimly. But even as he spoke, alarms began blaring throughout the facility. Their 10-minute window had closed. They know we're here, Kira said unnecessarily. The sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the corridors, not the chaotic rush of panicked defenders, but the measured advance of enhanced rogues moving with military precision. Alpha Team, report, Darius commanded. Static filled the comms, then Victor's voice came through distorted, heavy resistance on level 3. We've found what looks like the main laboratory, but it's heavily defended. And Darius, there's something else you need to know. What? We found Marcus. He's here, but he's not in charge anymore. There's someone else giving orders. Someone wearing council robes. Council Prime, Kira thought with growing dread. The voice from the mansion. Can you reach the main lab? Darius asked. Negative. Too many enhanced rogues between us and the target. But there's another route, maintenance tunnels that run parallel to the main corridors. Problem is, they're not on any of the schematics we recovered. Kira closed her eyes, extending her senses despite the facility's dampening effects. Somewhere in this maze of horror, Lily was waiting. And Ethan. There. A pull, faint but unmistakable, tugging her toward the facility's heart. I know where they are, she said. The maintenance tunnels were exactly as advertised, narrow, dark, and filled with pipes that dripped unknown substances. But they led deeper into the facility than the main corridors, bypassing the heaviest defenses. As they crawled through the cramped space, Kira became aware of sounds filtering through the walls, machinery humming with purpose, voices chanting in a language that predated human civilization, and underneath it all, a child sobbing. Lily. The tunnel opened into an observation deck that overlooked the facility's central chamber. What Kira saw there would haunt her dreams for the rest of her life. The room was vast, circular, with walls covered in symbols that seemed to writhe in the flickering light of ceremonial torches. At the center stood an altar made of what looked like obsidian, surrounded by figures in dark robes. And chained to the altar. Lily, Darius breathed, his voice breaking on his daughter's name. But Kira's attention was caught by another figure, one that made her heart stop entirely. Ethan stood beside the altar, but it wasn't the brother she remembered. This version was taller, more muscular, his body bearing the scars of extensive surgery. Silver tattoos covered his arms and chest, pulsing with unnatural light. His hair had gone completely silver, and his eyes. His eyes were the cold, empty blue of Arctic ice. The ritual must begin, Council Prime intoned, his ancient voice carrying easily through the chamber. The prophet child's gifts will be transferred to our chosen vessel, ensuring our continued dominion over the lesser pacts. Transfer. The word hit Kira like a physical blow. They weren't just going to use Lily's abilities, they were going to steal them, leaving her an empty shell while some council member gained the power of prophecy. We have to move, Darius said, but his voice carried the hollow ring of desperation. The chamber was filled with enhanced rogues, council members, and supernatural defenses they couldn't even identify. Even with their coalition forces, a direct assault would be suicide. But as Council Prime raised a curved blade that gleamed with silver fire, Kira realized they were out of time for strategy. She dropped through the observation window without warning, her body shifting mid-fall as her wolf surged to the surface. But this wasn't the weakened creature that had barely survived the playground encounter. Weeks of proper nutrition and the pack bond with Darius had restored her strength, and rage provided the rest. Silver light exploded from her as she hit the chamber floor, a nova of power that sent the nearest enhanced rogue stumbling backward. For the first time in 2 years, she let her wolf fully manifest, Not just the physical transformation, but the deeper connection to the moon goddess herself. Impossible, Council Prime hissed. Silver wolves can't access their true power without pact support. But Kira wasn't alone. Through the pact bond, she felt Darius's strength flowing into her, along with the combined will of 43 alphas who'd lost everything to these monsters. The silver light intensified, becoming a beacon that cut through the chamber's oppressive darkness. Ethan, she called out, hoping some fragment of her brother remained beneath the council's modifications. It's me. It's Kira. He turned at the sound of his name, and for a heartbeat, she thought she saw recognition flicker in those cold eyes. Then his expression shifted to something that chilled her soul, not hatred, but complete indifference. Target acquired, he said in a voice that carried no warmth, no humanity. Eliminating threat. He moved with inhuman speed, silver-enhanced strength behind every blow as he attacked the sister he no longer remembered. Kira barely managed to dodge, her heart breaking with every strike she was forced to deflect. Ethan, please, she gasped, catching his wrist as he tried to drive claws into her throat. It's me. Your sister. Remember the stories I used to tell you? Remember the songs? For a moment, something flickered behind his eyes. His attack faltered, confusion replacing cold purpose. Pain, he whispered, his voice suddenly young and lost. They said the pain would stop if I forgot. But the pain never stops. I know, baby brother. I know. Tears streamed down her face as she held his shaking form. But I'm here now. I'm going to get you out of here. The moment of connection shattered as Council Prime's voice cut through the chamber. Fascinating. The subject retains some emotional memory despite our reconditioning. No matter, the ritual will erase such inconvenient remnants. The blade descended toward Lily's chest. Darius appeared as if conjured from shadow, tackling the ancient werewolf away from his daughter. But more council members emerged from the chamber's recesses, and the enhanced rogues were recovering from Kira's power display. The facility is compromised, one of the robed figures announced. Initiate containment protocol. Alarms began blaring with renewed urgency, and Kira felt the floor vibrate beneath her feet. Explosives, she realized with growing horror. They're going to bring the whole place down rather than let us escape with their secrets. Through the chaos, she saw Victor and his team fighting their way into the chamber, their faces grim with the knowledge that they had maybe minutes before the entire facility came down on their heads. We need to move. Victor shouted over the alarms. The children are secured, but we can't carry them all up 7 levels of collapsing infrastructure. Kira looked around the chamber, cataloging impossible choices. Lily lay unconscious on the altar, drained by the interrupted ritual but alive. Ethan crouched nearby, lost in whatever memories the council had left him. Dozens of silver wolf children waited in the upper levels, too weak to save themselves. And somewhere above them, tons of earth and concrete were about to come crashing down. There's an emergency transport system, Marcus's voice cut through the chaos, and Kira spun to see the former beta limping toward them, his face bloodied but his eyes clear for the first time in years. The council built it as an escape route. It can carry the children to the surface, but someone needs to stay behind to operate it manually. Someone? Darius demanded. Someone expendable, Marcus said quietly. Someone who's already lost everything that matters. The facility shuddered around them, chunks of concrete raining from the ceiling as the demolition charges began their work. In minutes, this entire place would be a crater. Kira looked at her brother, her heart breaking as she realized the truth she'd been trying to deny. The boy who'd shared her childhood, who'd made her laugh even in the darkest times, who'd trusted her to protect him, that boy was gone. What remained was a broken shell wearing his face, trapped forever between the child he'd been and the weapon they'd tried to make him. But Lily was still whole. Still savable. Still her responsibility. Take care of him, she whispered to Darius, pressing a kiss to Ethan's forehead as the facility continued to shake apart around them. Whatever's left of him, please don't let him face this alone. The choice was tearing her apart, but it was the only choice she could make. Save the children who could still be saved. Let the dead bury their dead. Even when the dead still wore her brother's face. If you are enjoying this video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Chapter 7. The weight of impossible decisions had a sound, the grinding of concrete and steel as the facility began its final collapse around them. Kira stood frozen between her brother and the emergency transport that could carry dozens of silver wolf children to safety, her heart tearing itself apart with each second of hesitation. Kira. Victor's voice cut through the chaos. We have to go now. Ethan crouched beside the obsidian altar, his silver-streaked hair catching the emergency lighting as he rocked back and forth, lost in some internal battle between the boy he'd been and the weapon they'd made him. When he looked up at her, his eyes held fragments of recognition swimming in an ocean of conditioning and pain. Sister? The word came out broken, uncertain, as if he wasn't sure what it meant anymore. The facility shuddered again, and a section of ceiling crashed down mere feet from where Lily lay unconscious. Time was running out with each heartbeat, and Kira could feel the weight of 43 rescued children waiting in the emergency transport, their lives balanced against her brother's fractured existence. Choose, her wolf demanded. Choose now. I'm sorry, she whispered to Ethan, the words barely audible over the alarms and destruction. I'm so sorry, baby brother. She scooped Lily into her arms and ran for the transport, each step feeling like a betrayal that would haunt her for the rest of her life. Behind her, she heard Ethan call out, not her name, but a sound of pure confusion and abandonment that nearly brought her to her knees. The emergency transport was a marvel of paranoid engineering, a reinforced tube that shot through a pneumatic system, designed to evacuate council members in case of catastrophic facility failure. It could carry 50 people to the surface in less than 3 minutes, but someone had to operate it manually from the chamber level. Marcus stood at the controls, his weathered hands steady despite the blood streaming down his face. Get them in, he ordered, his voice carrying the authority he'd once wielded as Darius's beta. All of them. The rescued children were loaded with desperate efficiency, some conscious enough to understand they were being saved, others too traumatized or drugged to comprehend anything beyond following instructions. Kira settled Lily's unconscious form among them, her heart breaking as she realized what came next. You have to go with them, Marcus said, not looking at her as his fingers flew over the transport controls. They'll need someone they trust when they reach the surface. What about, Kira began, then stopped. They both knew what about. Ethan was still down here, still lost in the collapsing nightmare of the council's making. I'll handle it, Marcus said quietly. It's the least I can do after everything. But as the transport sealed and began its ascent, Kira heard footsteps echoing through the chamber, not Marcus's limping gait, but the powerful stride of an alpha who'd made his own impossible choice. Darius. Through their pack bond, she felt his resolve crystallize into something unbreakable. He wasn't leaving Ethan behind. Couldn't leave a child, any child, to die alone in this place of horrors. No. She tried to project through their connection. Don't do this. Don't leave Lily orphaned. Don't leave me alone. But his mind was already made up, his alpha instincts overriding everything else in the face of a child in danger. Through their bond, she felt the moment he found Ethan huddled beside the ruined altar, felt his gentle words as he coaxed the broken boy to trust him enough to move. The transport broke through to the surface just as the first major structural collapse sent shockwaves through the earth. Kira stumbled out into clean night air, carrying Lily while Victor's team helped the other children to safety. Around them, the coalition forces were establishing a perimeter, but their faces held the grim knowledge that not everyone had made it out. Alpha? Victor asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. Kira closed her eyes, extending her senses through the pack bond. Darius was still alive, still down there, but his life force was growing weaker as tons of concrete and steel buried the facility deeper with each passing minute. He went back, she said simply. For Ethan. The next few hours passed in a blur of emergency protocols and desperate coordination. Medical teams triaged the rescued children, identifying those who needed immediate hospital care versus those who could be stabilized in the field. The coalition alphas began the grim process of contacting other packs, trying to identify which children belonged where and who had been missing for how long. But Kira couldn't focus on any of it. Through the pact bond, she felt Darius growing weaker, his presence in her mind flickering like a candle in a hurricane. He was alive, but barely, trapped somewhere in the buried maze of the facility's lower levels. "We need heavy equipment," she told Victor. "Industrial excavators, search and rescue teams, everything we can get." "Kira," Victor's voice was gentle but firm. The facility was 7 levels deep, built into solid bedrock. Even if we had military-grade equipment, it would take weeks to dig down to where they might be. Weeks. The word hit her like a physical blow. Darius couldn't survive weeks trapped beneath hundreds of tons of debris, even with his alpha constitution. But she had to try. Had to believe that somehow, against all odds, she could still save something from this nightmare. The search and rescue operation began at first light, coordinated by 3 different government agencies who asked no questions and worked with supernatural efficiency. By evening, they'd cleared enough debris to confirm that the facility's upper levels had been completely destroyed, crushed beyond any hope of survivors. But the lower levels might still have intact spaces, air pockets where someone could survive, at least temporarily. Lily woke on the second day, her eyes unfocused but aware. The interrupted ritual had damaged her prophetic abilities, leaving her with fragments of sight that came and went like distant radio signals. But she was alive, whole, and when she saw Kira sitting beside her hospital bed, she smiled with heartbreaking trust. "Where's Daddy?" she asked, the question Kira had been dreading. "He's..." Kira struggled for words that could explain the unexplainable to a 7-year-old. "He's helping someone. Someone who needed him very much." "Ethan," Lily said with matter-of-fact certainty. "He went back for Ethan because Daddy doesn't leave children behind. Even broken ones." The simple truth of it nearly destroyed Kira's composure. She gathered Lily into her arms, holding the child who'd become her responsibility, her family, her reason to keep fighting when everything else had been taken away. On the 3rd day, the rescue teams found them. The call came at dawn, just as Kira was beginning her daily vigil at the excavation site. 2 bodies, recovered from what had been the facility's central chamber. The first was easy to identify, Darius, his body bearing the unmistakable scars and build that marked him as Alpha King. He'd died protecting someone, his arms wrapped around a smaller figure in a gesture of final sacrifice. The second body was too damaged by fire and debris to identify immediately. Burned beyond recognition, it could have been anyone, Marcus, finishing his redemption arc with a final act of courage, or Ethan, finally finding peace after years of torment. Kira stood at the edge of the excavation pit, staring down at the covered forms being carefully lifted from the rubble, and felt something inside her chest crack apart. Through the pact bond, now fading like an echo, she'd felt the moment Darius died, his life force flickering out like a snuffed candle. The pain of it had dropped her to her knees in the middle of a pack meeting, a psychic scream that had sent every werewolf in a 3-mile radius howling in sympathetic anguish. But this, seeing his body, knowing with absolute certainty that he was gone, this was different. This was the moment when hope finally died, leaving only the terrible weight of survival and responsibility. "The children need to be placed with appropriate packs," Victor said quietly, standing beside her as the recovery team worked. "The older ones remember their original families, but the younger ones..." He shook his head. "Some of them have been in council custody since they were infants. They don't know any life except captivity." Kira nodded, though she couldn't look away from the covered bodies. "What about genetic testing? For identification?" "Already ordered. We should have results within 24 hours. 24 hours to find out if her brother was finally at peace, or if Marcus had paid the ultimate price for his years of betrayal. Either way, someone was dead who might have lived if different choices had been made." "There's something else," Victor continued, his voice carefully neutral. "The council members who escaped, we've had reports of increased activity in Europe and Asia. Whatever they were planning with the Silver Wolf experiments, the destruction of this facility was just a setback, not a defeat." "Then we keep fighting," Kira said, finally turning away from the excavation. "We build something better. Something that protects children instead of exploiting them." As if summoned by her words, Lily appeared at her side, having slipped away from the medical team with the casual ease of a child who'd grown up evading adult supervision. She slipped her small hand into Kira's, offering comfort with the wisdom of someone who'd seen too much but hadn't let it break her spirit. "I can still see some things," Lily said softly. "Not everything, not like before, but some things. And I see you teaching the other children. Teaching them to be strong, to be safe, to be family." Family. The word carried weight that had nothing to do with blood and everything to do with choice, sacrifice, and the bonds forged in fire. Kira looked around at the rescued children, 43 silver wolves of various ages, all of them bearing the scars of council experimentation, all of them needing guidance and healing and hope. They were her responsibility now, her pack, her reason to keep breathing when grief threatened to drag her under. "Then that's what we'll do," she said, squeezing Lily's hand. "We'll build something better. Something worth the price that was paid for it." The sun was setting behind them as the excavation teams prepared to wrap up for the day, their work incomplete but their message clear. The facility's lower levels were too unstable for further recovery efforts. Whatever remained down there would stay buried, another secret swallowed by the earth. But as Kira turned to lead her new family away from the destruction, she felt something through the fading pack bond, not Darius's presence, which had gone silent 3 days ago, but something else. A flutter of consciousness, distant and damaged but definitely alive. She stopped walking, extending her senses as far as they would reach, but the sensation faded like smoke. Maybe it was just wishful thinking, grief playing tricks on her mind. Maybe it was the echo of other supernatural presences in the area. Or maybe, somewhere in the buried darkness, someone was still fighting to survive. But the genetic testing would tell them tomorrow which body belonged to whom, and then she would finally know if she was the last of the Silvermoon pack, or if some fragment of her brother had found peace in the rubble of the council's ambitions. Either way, she had 43 reasons to keep moving forward, and the memory of a man who died believing that no child, no matter how broken, should face the darkness alone. Chapter 8. 6 months after the council facility burned, Kira woke to the sound of children arguing over breakfast and the smell of pancakes burning in the kitchen. For a moment, that blessed space between sleep and consciousness, she forgot that her world had ended and been reborn into something entirely different. Then reality crashed over her like a cold wave, bringing with it the familiar ache that had taken up permanent residence in her chest. Darius was still dead. Ethan was still broken. And she was still responsible for 43 silver wolf children who looked to her for answers she didn't have. But they're alive, she reminded herself, pulling on clothes that had once belonged to a woman who'd never expected to become a surrogate mother to an entire generation. And that has to be enough. The Silvermoon Sanctuary, named for her lost pack and funded by a coalition of grateful alphas, occupied 300 acres of Montana wilderness, far from prying eyes and close enough to civilization for necessary supplies. The main lodge could house 60 people comfortably, with smaller cabins scattered throughout the property for those who needed solitude or specialized care. It was beautiful, functional, and nothing like the home she dreamed of building. Downstairs, chaos reigned with the cheerful dysfunction of a large family. 12-year-old Sarah was mediating a dispute between twin 6-year-olds over who got the last waffle, while 16-year-old Marcus, named for the man who died saving them, attempted to cook more batter with limited success. "Miss Kira." 10-year-old Jamie rushed over, his silver-streaked hair falling into eyes that sparkled with mischief. "Tell Sarah that chocolate chips are a perfectly acceptable breakfast food group." "They are not," Sarah protested, her natural leadership instincts taking over as they did most mornings. "Protein, grains, and fruit. That's what makes a balanced meal." "Chocolate has antioxidants," piped up Emma, who at 14 was their resident intellectual and could argue her way out of any situation. "Therefore, it's basically medicine." Kira found herself smiling despite the weight of responsibility pressing down on her shoulders. 6 months ago, these children had been broken, traumatized shells barely clinging to sanity. Now they were arguing about waffles and testing boundaries like normal kids should. Normal. The concept was relative when your family consisted of genetically modified werewolf children with varying degrees of supernatural abilities, but it was the closest thing to peace any of them had known. Compromise, Kira announced, moving to rescue the burning pancakes. Chocolate chips in half the pancakes, fruit in the others. And Jamie, you're on cleanup duty for making Sarah chase you around the kitchen. The collective groan that followed her announcement was perhaps the most beautiful sound she'd heard all week. Where's Lily? She asked, noticing the 7-year-old's absence from the breakfast chaos. Setting the table, Sarah replied, then dropped her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. She made one too many place settings again. Kira's heart clenched. Every morning for 6 months, Lily had set a place for her father at the breakfast table. Every morning, Kira had to decide whether to say something or let the child hold on to her hope that Darius would somehow walk through the door. She found Lily in the dining room, carefully arranging silverware with the precision of someone performing a sacred ritual. The extra place setting sat at the head of the table, complete with a napkin folded exactly the way Darius had preferred. Good morning, sunshine, Kira said gently, kneeling beside the child who'd become her daughter in all but blood. Good morning, Mama Kira. The title still sent warmth through her chest, even after months of use. I made Daddy's place nice today. I think he might come home for breakfast. 6 months of gentle corrections, of explaining death and loss in terms a child could understand, and Lily still insisted her father was simply playing hide and seek in the shadow place. Dr. Reeves called it healthy denial, a coping mechanism that would fade with time and therapy. Kira called it hope, and she wasn't sure which of them was right. Maybe he will, she said softly, pressing a kiss to Lily's dark curls. But even if he can't make it, we'll save him some pancakes just in case. Lily beamed at her with the radiant trust that children gave so freely and adults guarded so carefully. I drew him a new picture last night. Want to see? Before Kira could answer, Lily was already racing toward her room, her small feet thundering up the stairs with boundless energy. The drawing she returned with made Kira's blood run cold. It showed a man who looked unmistakably like Darius, but he was surrounded by darkness, heavy chains wrapped around his wrists and ankles. His eyes were open, aware, but filled with a pain that seemed to leap off the paper. Where did you see this? Kira asked, trying to keep her voice casual. In my dreams, Lily said matter-of-factly. Daddy's in the shadow place, but he's not sleeping like everyone thinks. He's waiting. Waiting for what? Kira wanted to ask, but the sound of footsteps interrupted her thoughts. She turned to see Dr. Chin, their resident physician and trauma specialist, approaching with the gentle smile that meant difficult news was coming. He's awake, Dr. Chin said without preamble. Lucid, but fragile. He's been asking for you. Ethan. After 6 months of catatonic withdrawal, her brother was finally ready to face the world that had broken him. The medical wing of the sanctuary was designed for comfort rather than clinical efficiency, soft lighting, warm colors, windows that looked out over the forest rather than sterile walls. Ethan sat in a chair by one such window, staring at the sunrise with the hollow expression of someone who'd seen too much darkness. He'd lost weight during his recovery, the supernatural enhancements fading as his body healed from years of chemical manipulation. Without the silver tattoos and unnatural muscle mass, he looked heartbreakingly young, closer to the 14-year-old boy she remembered than the weapon the council had tried to create. Ethan, she said softly, not wanting to startle him. He turned at her voice, and for the first time in 2 years, she saw genuine recognition in his eyes. Not the broken fragments that had flickered in the facility's depths, but real awareness of who she was and what she meant to him. Kira. Her name came out rough with disuse, but it was definitely her name, spoken with love rather than programmed indifference. You're real. You're actually real. She was across the room in seconds, pulling him into a hug that she'd dreamed of for 2 years. He felt fragile in her arms, like something precious that had been carefully put back together after being shattered. I'm real, she whispered against his hair. I'm here, and I'm never leaving you again. They held each other while the sun rose over the mountains, 2 survivors of the same nightmare finally finding their way back to each other. It wasn't the joyful reunion she'd imagined. Too much had been lost, too much had changed, but it was healing, and sometimes that was more valuable than happiness. Marcus? Ethan asked eventually, pulling back to study her face with eyes that still held shadows. The man who helped us escape. Kira's throat tightened. He didn't make it out. But he saved us all, including you. At the end, he remembered who he used to be. Ethan nodded slowly, processing information with the careful precision of someone who'd learned not to trust his own thoughts. And the Alpha King? Darius Blackthorne? The question she'd been dreading. How did she explain that the man who died saving Ethan had also become the most important person in her world? How did she make him understand that she was grieving for someone he'd never really known? He didn't make it either, she said simply. But he made sure you did. Something shifted in Ethan's expression, not grief, exactly, but a kind of understanding that spoke to depths of experience most teenagers would never possess. He was your mate, Ethan said. It wasn't a question. How did you? I remember fragments. Pieces of conversations, emotions bleeding through pack bonds. His smile was sad but genuine. I'm glad you found someone who made you happy, even if it was brief. The simple acceptance in his voice nearly undid her composure. This was her little brother, the boy who'd once built pillow forts and insisted on reading her bedtime stories, offering comfort for a loss he could barely comprehend. He's going to be okay, she realized with sudden clarity. Damaged, changed, but okay. A commotion in the hallway interrupted the moment, raised voices, running footsteps, and the unmistakable sound of Lily in full dramatic mode. What now? Kira muttered, but she was already moving toward the door. She found Lily in the main hallway, surrounded by a cluster of concerned adults and gesticulating wildly at a fresh drawing clutched in her small hands. I saw it. Lily announced with the conviction of a prophet delivering divine revelation. I saw Daddy. He's not dead, just hidden away dead. Victor, who'd taken over much of the day-to-day operations of the sanctuary, knelt beside Lily with practiced patience. What did you see, little one? Daddy's playing hide and seek in the shadow place, Lily said, holding up her drawing. He's got chains on his arms, but he's thinking about us. He's thinking about coming home. The drawing was more detailed than usual, an underground chamber with stone walls, scientific equipment, and a figure that looked unmistakably like Darius chained to a wall but very much alive. His eyes were open, aware, and filled with determination rather than defeat. Kira felt the world tilt sideways as the implications hit her. The council facility had collapsed completely, she'd seen the wreckage herself. But what if there were other facilities? What if the body they'd found hadn't been Darius at all? That's impossible, Dr. Chen said gently. We confirmed the identification through DNA testing. DNA can be falsified, Victor said thoughtfully, his alpha instincts clearly picking up on something the rest of them had missed. And we all know the council has resources we can't imagine. But why? Kira asked, though part of her already knew the answer. Why keep him alive? Because Alpha Kings are rare, Victor replied grimly. And a captured Alpha King, properly conditioned, would be the ultimate weapon. Someone with legitimate authority over multiple pacts, but loyal to the council's agenda. The thought of Darius in council custody, undergoing the same conditioning that had nearly destroyed Ethan, made Kira's stomach turn. But it also ignited something she'd thought was dead, hope. If he's alive, I can save him. If he's out there somewhere, we can bring him home. We need intelligence, she said, her mind already shifting into tactical mode. Resources, contacts in Europe and Asia where the surviving council members fled. We need proof, Victor countered. Something more concrete than a 7-year-old's drawings, no matter how accurate they've proven to be. But Lily was already moving, racing up the stairs toward her room with the single-minded determination of a child on a mission. She returned moments later with an armload of drawings, dozens of them, all depicting variations of the same theme. Darius in chains. Darius in underground chambers. Darius fighting conditioning that tried to break his will. And in the most recent drawings, Darius looking directly at the viewer with eyes that held a message, find me. He's been trying to tell us, Lily said with matter-of-fact certainty. Daddy's been sending me pictures so we'd know he's still playing the game. Kira looked around at the faces of her makeshift family, children who'd survived horrors beyond imagination, adults who'd lost everything to the council's ambitions, and one small girl whose gifts might be the key to saving the man who'd sacrificed everything for them. It was insane. It was dangerous. It was probably doomed to failure. It was also hope, and hope was something they'd all thought was buried under tons of concrete and grief. Then we find him, Kira said, pulling Lily into her arms as the child beamed with vindication. But we do it smart, and we do it together. As evening settled over the sanctuary, Kira stood at the kitchen window, watching her family scatter to their various evening activities. Ethan was in the library, slowly rebuilding his relationship with books and learning. The younger children were playing a complicated game that seemed to involve equal parts tag and supernatural abilities. Lily was at the dining table, working on another drawing with intense concentration. This is enough, Kira thought, watching the controlled chaos of her new life. Even if we never find Darius, even if Lily's drawings are just wishful thinking, this is enough. But even as the thought formed, she felt a familiar presence, not through a pact bond that had been severed by death, but through something deeper, more enduring. The love that survived loss, the connection that transcended physical form. Not gone, her wolf whispered. Just hidden. Lily appeared at her side, slipping her small hand into Kira's with the casual affection of a child who'd claimed her as family. What are you thinking about, Mama Kira? Tomorrow, Kira replied honestly. And all the tomorrows after that. Are you sad? The question deserved an honest answer. Sometimes. I miss your daddy very much. But I'm not broken, sunshine. I have you, and Ethan, and all our family here. That makes me strong enough to keep going. Lily nodded with the wisdom of someone who'd lived through more trauma than any child should experience. Tomorrow we start looking for Daddy properly, right? Tomorrow we start planning, Kira confirmed. But tonight we celebrate being alive, Lily finished with a grin. As if summoned by their words, the rest of the family began gravitating toward the kitchen, drawn by the promise of dinner, conversation, and the simple miracle of belonging somewhere safe. Kira looked around at the faces of her chosen family, at the life she'd built from the ashes of loss and trauma, and felt something she hadn't experienced in months, gratitude. Not happiness, that would come later, if at all, but gratitude for survival, for second chances, for the stubborn persistence of hope even in the darkest circumstances. Tomorrow, they would begin the impossible task of finding a man who might not even be alive. They would face new enemies, new challenges, new losses. But tonight, they were together. Tonight, they were safe. Tonight, they had each other and the promise of sunrise and the radical act of choosing to keep believing in better days. And sometimes, Kira thought as Lily's laughter filled the kitchen like music, that was enough to light the darkness and make even the longest night bearable. The hunt would continue. The fight would go on. But first, they would remember how to live, how to love, how to find joy in small moments and strength in each other. The sun would rise again tomorrow, and they would rise with it. I know you enjoyed this video. Kindly leave a like button and subscribe to this channel for more videos like this. Also don't forget to drop your thoughts in the comments section below and share this video to family and friends. The END.